you just need to set up the capture. So as soon as I see it go live on the stream, then I'll get ready to go.
Yeah, I know when you do the countdown. Oh. Yeah. Alright. Let me know when you do the countdown.
The game feed is kind of squashed again.
Oh.
Can you make it fill the whole space?
Yeah, hold on.
I noticed that was in the race as well. It's not that important for the race though. But for the solo run we should have it proper.
There we go. Alright, let me give you the countdown. Alright guys, this is Dabomstew with his Rebirth run. And whatever you guys voted for, you voted for it that last minute. There we go. Alright, so...
Alright, well...
Alright, let me give you the countdown.
Yeah, go for it.
Alright guys, this is Dabomstew with his Rebirth run. And whatever you guys voted for, you voted for it that last minute. Alright, on go.
So who selected in the end? We'll just quickly look.
2, 1,
and
go.
The winner is Uni by 7 votes to 6. So yeah, go for it. If you want to do the countdown.
Go.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
So welcome to Rebirth 1 New Game Plus. It's, I think, no, yeah, the final New Game Plus run of the marathon. And if you're wondering why we're doing the exact same ending for New Game Plus as New Game, the main reason is probably that this is pretty much the original Neptunia speedrunning category. It's got the most runners, the most times on the leaderboard, and is maybe one of the more optimized ones, but hard to tell, honestly, between the different games. But yeah, anyway, we'll just get started with the run. Because I'm on New Game Plus, I can do a few sequence breaks and extra little tricks compared to New Game. Nothing too major though. But first off, we'll be doing one menu for the entire game, basically. But first I have to watch a bunch of dungeons unlock. If you were making like a super optimized file for this run, you would try and skip some of these dungeons so that they don't appear. But optimizing it to that level is a little crazy. At least in my opinion. So I just have to set up a few things. F5 the page.
That's what I was trying to do. There we go. I had to refresh it.
Alright, now you just gotta resize it again, or is it already
It's
okay?
fine, it's fine.
Yeah, okay. I will restart
Just
in 3... You ready?
Yeah, go.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. So yeah, we had a bit of a delay there. It'll be a bit awkward, but whatever. You can see that the in-game timer is way higher than the actual timer now. Yeah, hopefully that is the last technical difficulty. If it isn't, then I'm sure we can work out something to do to make sure that the runs go through smoothly. So, things will stay pretty basic at the start for a while.
I can do this!
I can kill the enemies with a single hit with the X button or the A button. And I've set up my equipment so that ROM goes before Uni, because Uni is bad. The quest I'm accepting is the same one for New Game, but I have to menu quite a bit more to actually reach it. And now we're in the second dungeon, the final dungeon of Chapter 1.
I'll do my best for older sister!
That guy also takes one hit, but then he'll start taking more after this.
Jump!
And Uni's skirt is definitely not too short or anything when she jumps. Definitely not. Although perhaps that's why you guys chose her as the display character.
What's this?
I can pick up the chests on the ground, it doesn't lose me any time, but I don't need any of them. Interestingly enough, New Game Plus just ends up being completely candidates, despite this being the remake of the first game where the candidates didn't even exist. If I was going to use another character other than Uni, Rom and Ram, I'd use Netgear. The other characters aren't worth using
Okay, let's do this! Is it my turn?
at all.
Don't think you'll get out in one piece. What should I do?
What?
So for a while the game is going to be like, if there are multiple enemies I'll use a skill, and if there are single enemies then I will use the square button, or the X button, to quickly one-shot them with my combo.
Don't underestimate me just because I'm a goddess candidate. I can take care of this.
What?
But there will also be a couple of fights where I have to take more than one turn when it's meant to be an unwinnable fight. Of course, at level 999 I win all the unwinnable fights, but some of them do take quite a lot of doing. Not that first one though. the first unwinnable fight is very much straightforward in terms of health. It only has high attacking stats. So this game, unlike Rebirth 2 and Rebirth 3, doesn't prompt you to save between chapters. What happens instead is that the music kind of just dies. And then you know that you're entering a new chapter when the music dies. The music also dies in the other games, but then it brings up the prompt to save. Also, that sequence ends up being a bit weird in New Game Plus, because in New Game, that's when you go back and get the tutorial about medals, whereas in New Game Plus it knows that I've already seen that tutorial and so I don't have to do it. So I get 2 events in Last Station in a row without there really being any purpose of having them separated. After about a minute of cutscenes, finally get to enter the first dungeon. Of course I don't actually need to do anything like weaken enemies because of this being New Game Plus, so you get to see the quick route through the dungeon. Also, this game has an extremely optimistic estimate of 58 minutes. To put it into context, the world record is currently 56 minutes and 11 seconds, so Zfresh has a lot of faith in me getting within 2 minutes of the world record. But we'll see if that faith pays out or not. For now, it's just Blackheart, who at level 999 is just exactly the same as the boss before her.
My turn now.
If you want to watch how we approach Blackheart in a new game speedrun, you can go back and watch the VOD of Shifu's new game, no DLC run, where he finishes the game in a tiny bit over 2 hours, without any of these tricks.
This can't be. Can't move.
But one thing about this particular run, like the most random thing about this run, with it being New Game Plus, the fights aren't all that random, but there's a problem where you have to wait for the enemies to say like their death speech. When they die, they say a random line out of maybe 2 or 3 per enemy, and they have different lengths, and you have to wait for it to finish for the fight to be over. So, getting a good time in New Game Plus, once you get up to the highest level, it basically comes down to getting the best possible death lines on every character that you battle. And it just so happens that Rebirth 1 has the longest death lines on average of any game, really. The characters like to talk a lot, especially R4 and Blackheart, but mainly R4. So you might think I might be able to use Neptune in this run because she barely even leaves the party, she only leaves once. But the thing is that Neptune has the problem where her weapon gets getting unequipped because of these cutscenes where I get the Armus weapons. Of course there are 2 of them in this chapter, or 3 or whatever, but then there's also one in chapter 5, so if I was using Neptune I would just keep getting my weapon unequipped and lose a ton of damage. And since this is a Rebirth game, Victory Engine, the equipment is rather important.
It's my turn now.
My weapon gives me about 3,000 in each attack stat. And another thing about Rebirth 1 is that it has the hardest enemies to dodge in general, outside of Victory 2. Like, Victory 2 has the worst for New Game, but for this game, I mean, for New Game Plus, this is perhaps the worst game to dodge enemies in, because of V2 having the white orb. So I'm going to have to actually pay attention and react to the enemy movement patterns. And enemy movement patterns are of course fully random. So enemy positioning and the paths they take can waste a lot of time as well. But not so much battles. The battles in this game are pretty much 100% consistent. They might take like one more hit here and there, but at this level it's not going to cost me anything. Anyway, here's the infamous pudding scene. I'm sure we went into this during the New Game run, but this is like the Nep Noir shipper's dream. The one thing they can cling to as actual canon evidence of their ship. But then that pretty much died in the later games. You can tell that a New Game Plus run has so many things to talk about when I'm talking about stuff like that. But here is the sequence break that I talked about at the start of the run. You can actually skip a whole battle, which is pretty rare for a NEP game. While they are really badly programmed in general, in terms of stability, like they crash a lot, but they generally don't allow you to sequence back very much. And having an eject button here is one of the few times you can get a sequence break.
I won't lose.
Of course, you can only have an eject button here in New Game Plus, because the plan for eject buttons is, I think, in this dungeon. So obviously you can't implement it and buy any until you get out the normal way. But yeah, so you get to skip the battle with the 4 scrub enemies. Not that it would take very long, but any save time is save time. And the route for this run, and also the next run that I'm going to be doing, the Conquest End run, was made by Jisseed, who was like the first one to speedrun Neptune games. I think, anyway. He's a speedrunner that does a lot of different games, and is still kind of active in, not in the Neptune community, but in other communities. But he did runs of Rebirth 1 and Rebirth 2 back in 2015. I think Zfresh might have been doing vanilla net runs back then, but he was really, but Jisseed was really the founder of Rebirth runs. So all the credit for this route mainly goes to him. He also did the first run of the Conquest End. But I have changed the route for the Conquest End a bit since his runs. Oh yeah, Endeavour was also doing Victory back then as well, or maybe even slightly earlier. I'm not sure who was first though. I might be misattributing others. Oh, Token. Okay then. Completely forgot about that guy. He ran the original games like the PS3 ones. Whereas the Rebirth PC ports only came out in 2015 onwards. So that would make some sense. Token has since left the community, but obviously Endeavour's still around, and Zfresh as well. These mountain dungeons can be some of the worst to try and skip all the enemies in, because the enemies here can hug the walls pretty hard. And generally I want to hug the walls myself. So I guess that it started with Token and Endeavour doing the PS3 runs, and then once the Rebirth got PC ports in 2015, there was a bit of scene for those. Although mainly Rebirth 1.
I'll drill you with my shot. Okay, I'll do this.
And then after that, there was also like Z-Fresh doing his vanilla net stuff, and then in 2016 a bit more of a community built up around Mega Dimension. With, well, obviously people like Endeavour ran it, and Z-Fresh, but also Aurora Flow and myself. And then Aaron, the current world record holder for most categories, who is unfortunately unable to run in this marathon because of having really bad internet. Hopefully he'll be able to feature in the 2018 marathons, if or when they happen. So, while I was talking about history, which I don't know enough about apparently, Nep got poisoned, and not much else happened. Pretty much nothing of significance gameplay-wise anyway. Because none of these characters are actually in my party right now, them coming and going doesn't matter. That's why I use the candidates, because they're always in your party. Not so much that they're super strong, although the area of effect on Rom and Rand's skills is really useful. Uni is really just along for the ride as the third party member, so that it doesn't keep changing. I could use Netgear in her slot as well. But Uni has better range on her skills, which is why I use Uni. It's slightly faster to select Netgear on the menus, but if you use Netgear you have to move her forward a couple of times during battles, and that pretty much evens it out. Because Uni's Venom shot range is really, really long. But that's about all that's good about her. Her damage is actually really low. Rom and Ram are the battle team. I don't care about the other characters that much. This party is Rom, Ram, and Straggler, even though Uni gets to be the party leader, just because it's more convenient to have her as party leader, and because she won the poll in this case. Yeah, I've done a lot of work on the PC Rebirths, although I'm still missing 1 or 2 records. Mainly this game, New Game No DLC, which is the run that was featured earlier. The world record for that category is actually still held by Jaiseed, with a 149. And that actually turns out to be quite a good run. So I haven't been able to beat it yet, but I do have decent times for Rebirth 2 and for the normal end of Rebirth 3. Which is pretty much the only end you can do without crashing, like Green alluded to earlier. That being said, my normal end world record crashed after the final battle. Like just after timing had finished, the game crashed, so I got super lucky in not having it crash earlier. But yeah, we'll beat the Rebirth 1 world record eventually. One of us will. But it might be more years from now, depending on when someone decides to run it. I kind of fluctuate between the Neptune games a lot. Apart from doing Rebirth 2 Conquest to prepare for the marathon, I've also been doing a lot of work on Sega Hard Girls. This game not so much, but I do want to come back to it eventually and bop that 149. I consider the New Game Plus category pretty much over for attempts though, unless someone finds a new sequence break.
Okay.
This can't be happening to me.
As for the game itself, we've reached the end of Chapter 3 roughly, and we actually get to have the longest fight in the entire game, right here. This is meant to be an unwinnable boss, but unlike all the other unwinnable bosses, for some reason they gave Vert 800,000 health here.
I can take it.
So she takes a lot of turns to take down. Like, I had to use 7 attacks on her. I could have decreased the... I could have selected other skills and perhaps done it in 5 or 6, but it's still the longest fight in the game by a long way for New Game Plus. So, yeah. Pretty much every other unwinnable boss in the game just has really high attack stats.
I can take care of this.
This can't be happening to me.
We also get to listen to R4 taking ages to die there again. So yeah, pretty much every other boss in the game, which is meant to be unwinnable, just has super high attack stats. Whereas that green heart just has 800,000 health for whatever reason. And for context, the final boss of the game has about 660,000, and that is considered really high for a story boss in Neptune. Like, no other story boss gets nearly that high. Even the final boss of Victory, which is considered a way harder game, has less health than that. So, I guess it's really just a throwback to the original Vanilla Nep, where Dragon R4 had really high health. But it comes off a bit weird in this game. That doesn't mean that she's difficult in any way. You saw Shifu take her out in about 5 rounds in New Game earlier, and I'm not going to have much trouble with her earlier. It's just strange, to be honest. More so than anything else. To be honest, I consider the Fairy Fencer way that they did it to be, like, better, because at least they made it absolutely clear that it's an unwinnable fight. And you can't even beat it in New Game Plus, because beating it makes the story not really work correctly. It does mean that you just have to mash the wait button over and over until it's over, but it kind of makes more sense than being able to beat it once you reach a high enough level. Then again, later on we will see the only actually unwinnable fight in the Neptunia games as far as I know. That being CFW Brave at the start of Rebirth 2 and Mark 2. You can kind of consider it the same battle, because they just made the damage 0 on that fight. Even the Goldford in Victory 2 can be beaten eventually, but there's no way to beat Brave. Well, that's not Brave, it's Judge, but whatever. Same deal. Fight at the start of the game, you do 0 to it. And yeah, plat runs kind of vary as to how viable they are. I mean, what we're planning to do is eventually stream a couple of plat races on this channel, but nothing has been worked out as far as concrete details for those yet. Keep an eye out, make sure you follow this channel and watch out for events being posted, and also our Twitter. So we'll plug all of those while we wait for cutscenes. Also, I guess I just passed the first boss. Sorry, I passed the first boss who it wasn't a one-hit and wasn't actually an unwinnable fight. The Ancient Dragon takes 2 skills to kill. So, hooray, I suppose. I mean, honestly, I think V2 and Seiha are the only 2 plat runs planned at all.
It's my turn now.
And we go back to a couple of one-hits after this, because these enemies, I think, are weak to elements. Either that or the Ancient Dragon resists elements. But yeah, not every boss is going to be 2 or more turns from now on. Some of them will still be one-hits. So back to last station temporarily, although we're not recruiting Noir just yet. Gotta go fight a couple more robots first, and then we get to do the jammers, who are still kind of trolly in New Game Plus. But yeah, Platinum races, hopefully we get to do both Victory 2 and Sega Hard Girls on the channel at some point. But for now, I think the only, like, somewhat concrete plan for a Platinum race is V2. Green-Z Saber has already done a run of Sega Hard Girls Platinum on stream. He got a time of 10 hours and 2 minutes. That was on his personal stream. As to whether there'll be a race, I have no idea. There are some other relatively fast Platinums in the series, like, I suppose Cyber Dimension and Blanc vs Zombies, but Blanc vs Zombies is a bunch of RNG as well. And you can only do it on Sundays.
I won't lose.
It does not work on any other day.
I'll do this.
Maybe Rebirth 3, but Stella's annoying and Lily Ranks is still kind of annoying. Even if they're not as bad as other games. Nothing can really trump the Lily Ranks and Hyper Devotion Noir, as far as annoyingness goes, but Lily Grinds is still really annoying regardless. And Seiha would be ridiculously fast if you didn't have to do Lily Grinds. For some reason I thought I was going to go into like the main overworld. And then I remember this game doesn't have a main overworld. Anyhow, onto the Jammers fight. This is perhaps the most RNG fight in the whole run. And it's not even that RNG, so that's not really saying much. But it is a New Game Plus run, so what do you expect, I suppose? But yeah, also the Platinum runs are done with DLC, because the people on sites like PSN profiles are obviously going to use DLC, so there's no real reason to arbitrarily limit ourselves. We might do V2 without DLC just because DLC doesn't really save time on the Platinum for that. But you definitely do stuff like Sega Hard Girls with DLC because you just can't compete with no DLC. The drop RNG is just too brutal. And you also want to have the XP DLC. Okay, so I need to kill the skill gemmer with my first combo, which means I need to find where it is. That's not it, so now it's there.
I'll end this.
And Uni actually gets to do something. That is, take out the item jammer because the item jammer is immune to ice attacks. And Rom and Ram do ice element damage.
I'll cover everyone. It's my turn now.
But yeah, Uni is done again until I start getting to bosses that take 3 or more hits. Thanks Uni, you did your one job. Yeah, the DLC scouts do help quite a bit. Just because you have so few scouts otherwise at the start of the game in V2. But yeah, I suppose I'm not doing that great of a job of commentating this run, but I'm just running through the same path that Shifu did, except I one-hit every boss. So this run is only really here because it was the first majorly popular Neptune run, having actual double-digit runners. So enjoy perhaps the final showcase of it, unless we find new technology, new skips, whatever. Hopefully the new game category can get a bit faster still though, and I might work on that at some point after the marathon. Man, Zfresh, I had managed to avoid bringing up that meme for over half the run.
Happening.
But yes, I suppose I have to mention that this game has a rather mean category called runs with animations, where you're not allowed to do animation skips in combat. Like, if I'm trying to be polite about it, then I would call it a challenge run, where you try and find the best route without, or you try and find the best skills that kill enemies without having to have that have fast animations, rather. But honestly, it's just a bit of a meme at this point. It's like Rebirth 1 speedrun without pressing the left bumper in combat. So, if you want to do no animation skip, you can. It is still a category. On the leaderboards, you can attempt to get world record in it. I'm not sure how optimized it is, but I think it is actually reasonably optimized. Just because it's New Game Plus and it doesn't take all that much effort to optimize it. And yes, they're meming about Vanilla Neptunia no animation skip because that would be literally like 10 hours long, if not longer. Vanilla Nep has some really, really long animations in it. So chapter 5, fairly straightforward.
And here we go with Krino TV with a host of 2,266 viewers.
Oh man, the host for the Conquest ending.
It's left to bomb.
We just gotta get through the Rebirth 1 New Game Plus first, but thank you for the host regardless. For the people coming in, we're just over halfway through a quick New Game Plus blast through Rebirth 1. Earlier in the marathon, there was a run of this game without the New Game Plus carryovers, so if you want to see the run done right from the very start without any of this absolutely overpowered stuff, then go back and look at the VODs. But for the live run, if you stick around, there'll be a Conquest ending run of Rebirth 2 coming up after this, and that will again be without any New Game Plus. But yes, for the time being, we're blitzing through this game as fast as possible.
Okay, I'm all ready.
With the candidates.
Is it my turn?
This run should be just under an hour. The estimate is 58 minutes, which is slightly optimistic, but we might still meet it just because New Game Plus doesn't have that much time variance. and then we'll be right on to New Game Conquest ending, hopefully. So Noir has just joined up. We have all 4 CPUs. And we're going into the Robot Gauntlet. And after the Rebirth games are done for now, or well, it will be the final runs of the Rebirth games in this marathon, but
I'm scared, but I won't. Just watch.
once I'm done with my runs of the Rebirth games, we'll be moving on to a block of spin-offs by Oxwas, also known as Neplolly, including Nepu and Long vs. Zombies, which will be... the final run will be a run of Producing Perfection.
I'm not scared of you. Is it my turn? Okay.
And for that run, you can vote using the poll in the HDNMarathon chat to decide which CPU Oxwas will produce in his run. He can do any of them just fine. I think Noir has a substantial lead right now, but I'm sure there are enough of you left to change the tides if you really want one of the other CPUs to be produced.
Currently gets tied, Noir and Blom.
Oh, okay. Someone said that there was a big lead for Noir earlier, but I guess it couldn't have been that bad. So yeah, definitely get your votes in if it's Noir versus Blom tied right now. I'm sure you must have an opinion on Noir versus Justice. But yeah, this is perhaps the most steamroller of all the New Game Plus Neptunes as well. Good thing it is over quite fast as well. And now we get to the fastest chapter of this game. Unlike Rebirth 2, this game doesn't have any chapters that are under 2 minutes long. This one is the shortest and it's about 3 minutes long. Although the final chapter is also fairly short. This chapter is really just padded out by cutscenes, as you might imagine in a Neptunia game. Cutscenes, what a surprise. Kinda comes with the territory. Yeah, we talked to the free makers in Planetune. They don't quite join the party yet, but they are able to lead us to the one dungeon that we actually visit in Chapter 6. And we do get to save a bit more time over the new game run in this dungeon. It has the one use of Jumping Star for this run. Or the one time where Jumping Star saves time. Okay, I suppose that's another tiny one there. I cut the corner using Jumping Star to jump up to that platform, but the real time save is after this teleporter. If you're in New Game, you don't have Jumping Star and you have to go the long way around, like left at that first intersection, whereas in New Game Plus you can just jump up to that platform. Until Victory 2, the jump height without Jumping Star was really, really low. Like, you couldn't make it onto those tiny little platforms. It doesn't look all that tall when you try and jump up to it. Anyway, this is meant to be the final unwinnable fight in the game.
You could be strong, but I'm strong too!
This can't be happening to me.
But unlike Fake Green Heart, it's just a bunch of high stats and not really high health. So it dies pretty much immediately. So now, once a few more cutscenes are over, I'll finally reach the actual boss of this chapter, the first appearance of Overlord Momus, who has the same model as R4 from Rebirth 2 and Mark 2, and also really similar stats, but I'll get into that during the Rebirth 2 run.
It's my turn now.
Yeah, you can just barely two-hit Momus, it seems. V2 has really high jump heights in general though, especially in the Golden Summit dungeons, and the other couple of dungeons in Zero and Heart Dimensions that are using that style. Too bad you can't space jump in every dungeon. So chapter 7, the party split chapter, and also the longest chapter in the entire game, in New Game Plus anyway, just because you do so much kind of chasing things around. So this chapter will take about 10 minutes, and then the game will pretty much be over once it's done. But I need to go and visit all 4 nations and solve their problems. It's a fairly standard party split chapter for a Neptune game. They don't always split the actual party, like Rebirth 2 Mark 2 kind of has one of these in chapter 7, where they don't actually split the party, but you go to all 4 nations. But this one's just the standard party splits up. That being said, I'm using the candidates still, so my party does not get split up, thankfully. It would be rather annoying if they actually left. Anyway, so because I'm in New Game Plus, I visit them in order because it's the fastest doing for the menus. You also do this in the new game with DLC. Speedrun, where you have the OP Pludia and Pishi characters.
You look pretty tough. Is it my turn? I can't fall yet.
And Neptune there is, I think, the second to last boss that we can one-shot, because she has kind of only half the health of a normal boss at this point. She's meant to be the warm-up. I'll get to the real thing soon enough though.
I'm scared, but I won't. Okay. I can't fall yet.
And the hearts like to talk a lot, so expect lots of 5-second delays waiting for them to shut up as they die. They all have way too much to say in my opinion. Anyhow, those makers leave my party. Not that I give anything for them. And now, generic factory dungeon number too many to deal with in Last Station, because of course Last Station is full of factories. Okay, so this should be the final
You're
boss that I actually get to one-shot in this run.
Okay. I'll do
This can't be. Can't move.
It's another half-health CPU boss. Then I need to hug the wall here so that the enemies don't hit me. In V2 they got rid of this exploit, so you can't hug walls to avoid monsters very much.
Okay, I'll do.
This can't be. Can't move.
So that is that. Last station's over, 2 more to go. The remaining 2 should be a little faster just because they only have 1 boss fight each. But they do still have quite a few cutscenes, as you might imagine. And Tekken is the best maker you get in the run, as far as new game goes.
Yep.
Joins all the way up at level 60 when the rest of your party is around the 40s. Tekken's pretty OP. But obviously when I've got my OP candidates, why would I care about Tekken?
I'm not afraid of you.
This is not happening.
3 CPUs down, 1 to go. And then we get to fight Overload Moron 1 final time. Or should I say 2 final times, because it is 2 battles. This is the longest cutscene, I think, out of the cutscenes for this chapter though. Because they have this little quiz between the 2 blancs. In any case, it doesn't take that long regardless. And I just need to watch out for that one enemy that spawns in front of me. If you have a bad enough computer, you can probably just run straight through that guy. But thankfully my computer is actually pretty good, so it does mean that I have to dodge slightly more enemies than someone on a bad computer. Because games that have like significant differences on faster computers are really good for speedruns. As you can tell by this game. Hold on. I must have forgotten to turn off some kind of alert, or that might be something over Skype. Either way.
Okay, I'll do.
Sorry for the ear crusher.
I'm ready. I can take care. This can't be happening.
I have no idea what that actually was. I'll get it fixed between the 2 rungs though. So, this is the climax of Chapter 7. It's the battle against Overlord Moron. Momus is the actual name, of course, but Nep calls him Overlord Moron.
end this.
And now pretty much every boss is going to be a free hit or more, just because they start to have absolutely ridiculous pools of health. And most of them also resist ice at this point. Not by a huge amount, just by a little bit. And Uni finally gets to do some work. If this was Netgear, I would have to keep moving her forward, and that's why I don't like Netgear.
I'll end this.
But Netgear will get a starring role in the next run, so don't worry. She will be used in absolutely every fight in the Rebirth 2 run, as you might imagine. Because Netgear in Rebirth 2 is ridiculously overpowered. But now it's time for the final chapter of Rebirth 1, and Z-Fresh can get ready for the timing in about 3 minutes time. I will just call out time when I'm done, but... that isn't going to be for a bit longer just yet. I need to actually reach...
Hi.
Oh no, there is one more cutscene before I go to the dungeon. Where I received Nep's best weapon. At least outside of DLC. Oh no, there is a slightly better in-game weapon. Now we put all the weapons in the walls, so the CPUs just nonchalantly shove their weapons into holes that don't actually fit them properly, and somehow none of them break, because they're lucky like that. And we have to manually exit Platoon to make the dungeon spawn. This is actually a fairly unique dungeon as far as Idea Factory and Compile Heart go. They've only actually reused this one in NetU to my knowledge. Otherwise it stayed pretty much pristine, even if it is a fairly monotonous dungeon. But yeah, for once it's something that isn't just a complete rip-off of every other dungeon, at least as far as the textures go. I think NetU is actually the next run after Rebirth 2, so you'll get to see this dungeon again fairly quickly, relatively. But yes, it is one of the more unique dungeons in the series, at least until V2 came along.
I'm not afraid of you.
So
No,
R4 resists
next.
magic, but
I'm not over
she does
yet.
have
Not over yet.
not that much health for a boss this late on, because Dragon took all the health. Has over 600,000. And time will be very soon.
I won't lose. It's my turn now. Now.
Destroy.
Now.
I
Okay?
me
Okay, time.
lose.
No
56,
way me and
45.
Ron would lose.
Yeah, that's roughly what I got. Okay. So, GG, that is Rebirth 1 New Game Plus in a shade under 57 minutes. And ignore the timer because the timer both
One
starts
credit.
and ends early.
Big one credits.
So yeah, I'll take us through to the credits. Just be warned that the credits here are going to be quite loud relative to the rest of the game. So I might have to quickly tab out to turn down the volume, That or just be ready for loud volume in about 20 seconds. Because the credits in this game are kind of dodgy in obeying the volume setting for the rest of the game. So yeah, just be ready for loud volume and turn down your volume quickly if it's too loud. I will take my hands off the controller so that I don't skip them. I just won't tab out. Yeah, volume warning. Very soon. I will be right back during the credits and then we'll set up for Conquest.
Well, it's all over now. Who knew this all started with me being beat up?
Okay, so that's that. I think we'll just quickly go to intermission, and then we'll be ready for Conquest.